Hey, I'm Alex,
And I'm Brandon.
and welcome to Living Electric.
We're both content creators and electric vehicle enthusiasts.
And through this podcast, we hope to share our experience with owning electric vehicles and help you join the electric life.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living Electric. For today's episode, we are on episode 9. Just a quick correction. Last episode for our Earth Day, we said we were on episode 7. That was episode 8. We can count. we can count. Next one we can count to 10. So, but yes, we are on episode 9, and we are talking about the struggles of EV ownership and some hurdles and issues that will need to be addressed before EV adoption can take place.
Yeah, I think our first 8 episodes, we we talked a lot about some of the great things and great features and lifestyle that comes with driving an electric vehicle, but we're kind of getting real on this episode. It's not all sunshines and rainbows for everybody. There are some downfalls to EVs, and certainly there are some situations where an EV just isn't going to be right for you. So we're going to kind of dive into some of those today, and just kind of give you guys some things to think about too when you're considering looking at an EV. There's a lot. This is a very new space for a lot of people, so understanding what to expect is definitely very important.
Research. That's what we always say.
That's right.
That's why we started our podcast and our YouTube channels. We're all about EV education and just helping people understand what it's like to own an electric vehicle. So if you are interested in vehicles and cars, there's been a lot of articles that have been going around stating that 1 in 5 Californian drivers went back to gasoline powered vehicles after owning electric cars. And we wanted to discuss this study more and some other electric vehicle articles that are coming out and how they're relating to plug-in hybrids.
Yeah. So we actually found this study, and it was conducted over a decent amount of time. I believe it was 2012 to 2018 where they kind of interviewed people and asked some questions about their EV ownership. So they interviewed EV drivers and then kind of studied them to see if they stuck with their EV or turned their EV back in. So obviously 2012 through 2018 or 2019 is a wide range of years, especially for EVs. We're just chatting, kind of brainstorming for this. I mean, if you look back at 2012, how much different was this EV space? Like, you had the Nissan Leaf. That was the first year it came out, right? Nissan Leaf was 2012, so. And it had like 50 or 60 mile range. Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't really, it definitely worked for some people, but it's not like a compelling EV that somebody's going to want to go out and buy, I don't think. And then of course we had the Model S hitting the market around that time, but that's an incredibly expensive car at the time. I don't think you could even get one for under $100,000. So very different EV space in 2012 than we have now in the past few years, where there are some really good EVs under $40,000. The Model 3 is on the market now.
Yep.
And I think that's a lot of those vehicles have really pushed EVs over the top, and certainly the charging scape has changed immensely as well. Yeah, that's immensely. Been a huge change.
Yeah, especially with like charging networks like Electrify America, all these ChargePoint, EVgo, the supercharger network has like literally tripled in its size.
It's insane. I know. Even I'm just thinking, like, driving around now, I notice so many more chargers. Like, I can't go many places now without noticing at least one charger. And that might be because I have an EV now that I'm looking for them. But I mean, even back when I was interested, knew that was the car I wanted, I don't think I ever saw one. Like, there were very few and far between.
Yeah, I just remember sitting on PlugShare back in like 2015 before I worked for Tesla, looking for chargers and like taking my gas powered vehicle to go check them out. Like, such a nerd, such an EV nerd. But the really interesting thing about this study is that with like the articles and like a lot of like the auto journalists, like I'm gonna restart that. Sorry. The one thing that like I really wanted to point out when it came to these articles is just how they're titling the articles. It's coming across in a very, I think, a very anti-EV manner, where they're just simply stating 1 in 5 EV drivers are going back to gas. Like, I've seen so many titles of articles like that, but they're failing to say that this was done in that time frame, and only 70% of the people that they interviewed did not have home charging, and they also did not have workplace charging. And if they're in California, most of them probably live in big urban areas where you have street parking, and you might not have a place to park at work. You know, you would have to take the bus or public transport.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in this day and age, a lot of articles just get shared, and people are reacting to the headline versus reading the whole article and realizing the nuance between or around these kind of studies. And there certainly is more to the story than just 20% of people are turning in their EVs. Like, I don't think that's really the full story. I mean, you could probably write that about any car. Like 20% of people are turning in their Camrys. Like,
simply because it's a Camry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if anybody's a Camry driver.
Yeah. And I think EVs get a bad rap. They're kind of like an easy target for a lot of auto journalists who are like not with the technology or just don't want to convert to EVs. Certainly there's many on the good side too that are open to this kind of whole new frontier of car ownership. But yeah, that's a big thing that the study itself showed, is that why people are turning in their EVs, which I think was the kind of initial driver for this study, was to figure out like, hey, there's some people that are getting EVs, but then they don't like them. What's the deal with that? So I think some of the top factors were their charging availability, I think, was number one. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So charging is a big one. I mean, that really is a big part of the EV experience, is charging. I know we look at gas and we kind of say like, oh, that's not something you even have to worry about with a gas car. You can just buy a car and you know you're going to have a place to fill it up. Whereas with an EV, you kind of have to know what your plan is going to be. So I always tell people it's good to kind of find your charging routine, because it really is a routine. It's like plugging in your phone. Like you wouldn't buy an iPhone if you didn't have a outlet at home you could plug it into every night, right?
Yep.
So I think that's uber important for people, is to understand what their charging setup is going to be like. So for me, when I bought my car, I still am. I'm living in an apartment and didn't have home charging, so I had to know that I was going to have charging somewhere else. Fortunately, our office had a bank of like 24 some chargers I could use while I was at the office, so I could just plug in there, and that was my charging routine. I would drive to work, I would plug in my car, and I would leave work with 90% every evening. So that worked out great for me. And Brandon, your situation's probably more normal for a lot of people.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest hurdle with EV adoption, is addressing like home charging, especially at like rental properties and like urban areas, like, you know, like larger cities.
For sure.
I genuinely, like, for me, I think I take for granted that like I can simply come home and plug my vehicle in. Like, I'm actually better at plugging my car in than I am my phone. I think my phone's actually almost dead right now, but my car's charged.
Perfect.
But that's the thing. Like, it has really made like for us charging our vehicle much easier.
Yeah.
But there was actually a time when I lived at my parents', I was charging using an extension cord, which is not recommended. Just throwing that out there.
Okay.
I would charge my car using a 25-foot cable, and then I would plug in the charger that came with the car, and then I'd wrap it in a garbage bag so like water couldn't get in it. And that's how I charge my car. Dedicated.
Sounds very dangerous too.
I did not want to put gas in it, so yes, very dangerous.
That's funny.
But yeah, but that's the thing. Like, if you're living in a, you know, like a high-rise apartment, you can't drop an extension cord.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So question for you. I've kind of seen this debated sometimes. Do you think it would be better to have just a bunch of fast charging stations around these complexes, like kind of on street corners like gas is now? Or do you think they should just put in like a bank of 30 level 2 chargers in their complexes or their parking lots or whatever?
I would say the level 2s, honestly. Yeah, I think that's the best approach, because as we mentioned, like 90% of your charging habit is overnight or when your vehicle's sitting there.
Yeah.
I think like the fast chargers honestly should be reserved for more travel routes. But the level twos should absolutely be used for overnight charging for rental properties. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
I think that's definitely the dream, is just to have, like, even at my complex, especially when EV ownership is small, is just having like a bank of 5 chargers just like ready to go so people can plug in. The issue I think becomes when charging is something that a lot of people need to do a lot. Like, I think you'd have to figure that out where you say, okay, we've got 30 EVs at this complex. We've only got 5 chargers. You people can charge Tuesday nights. You people can charge Wednesday nights. Like, I feel like that would be a little iffy. Obviously, the best thing to do would just have like a bunch of chargers so that you can accommodate everyone. But I don't think that's feasible. And unfortunately, that puts the charging responsibility on whoever the property owner is versus a gas station, which is like an outside company. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways to go about it. I think it's also a huge business opportunity for people to say like, hey, we can install this charger at your complex. Just rent us this little like 20-foot square space. We'll install the charger. We'll maintenance it. We'll do it all. You just pay us like a flat fee every month to keep this charger here. So I think it'll be interesting when we kind of hit that tipping point of EV adoption where like everybody's buying one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You know, another thing I was thinking too, there's actually somebody in the Shaker Heights, Ohio area. He runs a company called Sway Mobility. And he does ride sharing with electric vehicles. And he works with, I think it's EV Box, to get like charging stations installed for the ride share vehicle. But I believe the public can use it. And they're focusing on apartment complexes. Nice. So the ride share car will sit there, but when it's not there, people can utilize the charger. Yeah. So I wonder if that would work like in big cities.
Definitely. Yeah. So I guess more to my story, I think I've talked about it before, but now that I am working from home 100%, I don't have access to that workplace charging. At least it's not reliable for me to drive 20 minutes to work and plug in and sit there for 4+ hours in my car for my car to charge and
just watch Netflix,
work off my laptop. Yeah. So what I'm doing right now is I've got a supercharger about 10 minutes away from me. So I am able to still charge somewhat reasonably, but it's kind of as convenient as gas was, where I'd have to take an extra trip. So luckily it's right next to the grocery store. So I typically just drive over there when we're getting our groceries and I can just plug in. It's all fine. But I think that's definitely the number one consideration when you're considering an EV, is to look at your charging situation. So if you're in a house, I think it's pretty easy. You can just get a charger installed at your house. But if you are in an apartment or don't have as reliable electricity at your living place, either you can't get charging installed or you're at a condo or apartment where the landlord doesn't want to install a charger, I think having access to a fast charger close to you is probably your best bet. Also, I don't think many people realize how big a business opportunity is to have a charger at your place of business or your apartment complex or wherever your business is. Because as soon as you get an EV owner that's looking for a place to live or a place to eat, their short list is probably going to have places with charging on them if they need to charge, right? So for me, I know if I had an EV and didn't have work charging, I can almost guarantee you I'd be at a complex with EV charging. And there's only probably half a dozen in Columbus, but that's probably where we would be. So I think a lot of apartment complexes need to realize that's a huge opportunity for them to attract new tenants. So yeah, I sent an email to my initially to my landlord who like runs our complex, and they were like, oh, well, it's not really in the plans right now. So I self-escalated that up to the community. It's like a huge real estate organization that runs our like apartment complexes. They have like 6 or 7 throughout Columbus. So I escalated up to them and sent them like a more detailed email. And where I live, there are tons of there's a huge rebate for installing a charger too. There's like an $8,000 rebate for installing a charger.
Crazy.
Which is like a crazy amount of money.
Yeah.
Just for them to install a charger and get it up and running. So I don't know what the costs are to install a charger, but I think at that cost you would probably be kind of close to breaking even just installing it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So
I know you can get like good like dual chargers where you can like charge 2 cars at once. I think
yeah.
for under like $2,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think the bigger hiccup for them, I think, is it's a brand new complex, and installing anything additional then is kind of a problem sometimes with the city and with local ordinances of like how they want things to look. So I think that's their biggest hiccup right now. But they said they received my email well. They said, "Hey, we'll look into it. We're going to vet this and see if it's a good option for us, and we'll get back in contact with you." So it's kind of where we're at right now. I'll update on the next podcast if I hear anything.
Yeah, keep us posted. Keep us posted. But to kind of like to tail off of that, it really always starts with the conversation. The consideration that's what leads to action. And I know when I was talking with the city council of Twinsburg back in 2015, I just presented them a map of chargers and be like, hey, like you could have all this business and, like all this like activity. And then nothing happened for 4 years. And then suddenly there was 8 chargers. Like, but that's the thing. Okay. Like you plant that seed and you never know. So, like if anybody who is listening to our podcast is interested in, starting that conversation with like a rental property or like a workplace, just send an email, provide some resources if there's rebates or grants, and just get that conversation started. You have no idea where it could take you.
Yeah. And we'll try to link it in the show notes here, but the template I used was actually on ChargePoint's website. So they have a really good template of basically telling you exactly what to say to your landlord or to who owns your property. And it basically goes through like, here's the benefits of an EV charger. Like EV adoption is growing very fast. And then it has some links in there to figure out what your local incentives are. So it'll link to that page, and they can put in Ohio or wherever you live, and basically search by whatever their location is to see what kind of kickbacks there are, because there's a lot of incentives right now for businesses and commercial chargers going in. So that's something I think businesses should absolutely take advantage of.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there is actually a new property management company here in the Cleveland area called Smartland Apartments, and they're taking old apartment buildings and old buildings and turning them into like luxury condos and like apartments. But what's really cool about this is that they're adding ChargePoint chargers at every single one of them, and they're adding between 2 and 4 chargers. And they're charging about 25 cents an hour for tenants to charge their vehicle.
Only 25 cents an hour?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
that's really good.
It's not that expensive, and like people can obviously just plug their car in just like they would if they had a garage to do so. Mm-hmm. So and plus I think that's open to the public too, so it's really helping expand the infrastructure here in Cleveland, which is really needed. Cleveland really needs to expand their infrastructure. But they're dedicated to it.
Both level 2 and DC fast charging?
Just level 2.
Just level 2.
Yeah. So I would say that it would make more sense for a tenant to use the charger than it would like, a typical person just driving by. Mm-hmm. But it's still pretty cool that they're bringing life to like old properties.
That's neat. Yeah, almost every new construction I see going up around Columbus will put in an EV charger because it's so easy to do when you've got everything ripped up and you're running the electric already.
Exactly.
Like that's probably where the biggest cost comes, is when you're trying to run electric to the charger.
Yeah.
So I know some people are kind of tentative about doing that because you're going to have to rip up like grass or whatever is already there to install like a line to the parking lot.
Yeah.
So I actually where I got my vaccine, I didn't even realize when I got my first one, just parked and got my vaccine and left. When I went back to get my second one, I noticed that they had a bank of 4 chargers there because it's a brand new, like Ohio Health is the name of it, but it's like a brand new hospital and like medical space there. And they have a brand new, parking garage there, so they put 4 chargers in the bottom bottom level of it.
That's awesome.
So yeah,
if anybody who is listening to our podcast is a landlord, or if they own like a rental property or workplace, one thing that I would recommend checking out is Adopt a Charger. It's a program that I believe is based out of California, but they work with multiple different states to install charging stations. There's a organization in Kentucky called Evolve KY or Evolve Kentucky, and they've installed, I think, almost 30 charging locations because of this program that they work through. So that could definitely assist people who are interested in installing chargers.
Nice. Okay.
Adopt a charger. We'll put that in the show notes.
Alrighty.
Yeah. I had to say that like a movie trailer.
So outside of charging, I think that's obviously the biggest one. That's what we spent most of the time talking about so far. The other big variable for people that got an EV and then ended up switching back to a gas car was their travel time or their commute distance. I don't think this is as big an issue for a lot of people because I think the average commute is like less than 20 miles or something. Like most people buy a house or like rent an apartment close to where they work because they don't want to drive for an hour just to sit at their desk. So, or go to whatever they're working. And I think that's definitely a consideration to have if you've got an extremely long commute. So certainly an EV is probably the dream car if you've got a reasonable commute. Even if it's an hour-long commute, I think you can definitely make it work. And you're going to save so much money on charging too, or on fuel, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you were saying you saved a ton of money, like commuting, right?
Yeah, well, when I would drive to the office, it was like 55 plus miles a day, and I was spending over $200 a week. No, that's a lie.
A month?
A month.
Okay.
A month, sorry. I gotta get some
that's
coffee.
a lot.
Yeah, that would be a lot. But that's the thing that like it's funny, like when I look at my commute, I no longer like dread it because I know that like I'm not spending as much money driving there because I was driving an electric vehicle. But like another thing, I don't mean to like go back to charging. Like if your workplace has charging, then your commute is kind of negated because you're charging at work.
That's true. Yeah. If they have free charging. I don't know many offices that put in like paid charging though. I feel like they kind of just treat it as a perk for employees.
Yeah. Take it out of our paycheck. No.
Yeah, so I think travel times or commute distance is something to consider. I think if you're somebody that's literally driving for a living, like you're maybe in sales or something and you're driving all over the states, you don't have time to sit at a charger, I would definitely still consider an EV. Definitely go for one with longer range and one that can fast charge. Those are definitely things to make sure you have if you've got a lot of driving to do. But also understand that you are going to probably spend some more time charging than you would just filling up and getting on your way. So I think that's not telling you not to buy an EV or telling you that it won't work in that situation, but I think it can be harder and you have to do a little bit more planning and kind of understand what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah. I would recommend before going to purchase a vehicle, sit down and map out your route and see how far you're driving daily and then calculate which EVs would fit in that range.
I think that's very smart to do. We were chatting before this too. We see a lot of articles as well from journalists or people that are very new to EVs and just want to like cover them or write about them and end up sometimes getting caught with like very low range because they just hop in the car and think it's going to be just like gas and you can just fill up wherever. Whereas at least right now, that's not really the case. You certainly have to do a lot more planning when you're taking longer trips or doing road trips in an EV, which I think we did a whole episode on. So go back and listen to that one.
I'm like, which number was that? No. Yeah. Losing track and we're not even at 10 yet.
I think that was episode 4. We did EV road trips. So go back and listen to that one if you want to hear more about EV road trips and kind of our tips and tricks for that. I know a lot of people, when they're looking at buying an EV or looking to make that switch to electric, they almost are hesitant to switch their whole household over to all electric. So I think a great way to start, and I see a lot of households do this that are 2-car families, start with one electric vehicle. You're probably going to use that vehicle for trips around town and stuff like that. and maybe have a second vehicle for when your family takes that long road trip down to Florida or that long road trip to North Carolina and is driving like 12 plus hours. I think a lot of families kind of operate that way, where they've got their one car for getting around town or for their heads of households to commute or whatever, and then they've got their car for their long trips or their, like, when they're taking some bigger endeavors.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good way to like test the waters too, to like see if like
Certainly.
going all electric would be like a good bet. I know for us,
Yeah.
like this is a perfect example. Like we will be fully electric except for our Miata.
Your fun car.
Yes, our fun car, the car that I can barely fit in. I'm too tall for it. But we will be getting we reserved a Volkswagen ID4. So we will be picking that up this fall. And that, I think, having an electric vehicle proved to us that we can go full electric, and it meets everything that we need it to.
And it's really hard to know till you actually own one too. Like, I think that's what we're seeing right now, where we've got you were showing me that chart earlier. We've got a lot of the innovators and the early adopters getting into EVs, but we haven't quite hit that majority where like a lot of people are trying them out. So I think a lot of people that are buying EVs now realize that it fits their lifestyle a lot more than they think.
Yeah. It's almost like those things you have to live and experience it.
Another good thing to do is Turo is a great thing to check out if you're just like, before you go and spend a lot of money on a new car or go spend like any kind of amount of money on a new car, you can usually rent a lot of these cars you're probably looking at on Turo just to test it out for a day. I know there's a lot of like Model 3s and Model S's in Columbus you can rent for like a couple $100 a day. Just drive it around for a little bit, see how charging would work. Maybe like what's your, if you're able to install charging in garage or driveway, or like how it might work for you. I think that's definitely something to try as well.
And it would always be good to talk to EV owners as well to get their feedback if you are curious about electric vehicles. Obviously, through listening to our podcast, you're getting that directly from us. But it's always good to like go to like group meetings and kind of just get involved there, because getting that firsthand ownership feedback is honestly a good way to evaluate if it would work for you.
Yeah. And I think we talked about it on our Earth Day episode, but there's a lot of local electric car enthusiast groups. So like we have Drive Electric Columbus here in Columbus. Do you Drive Electric Cleveland?
Drive Electric Northeast Ohio.
Northeast Ohio. Okay. So just encompasses all that, but
pretty much.
I think you're going to get a lot more wide range of views on EVs too at those kind of groups. Like both of us, I think, are pretty like EV fanatics, but you might see like some other people in different situations than us two at these groups. And anybody I've met that owns an EV loves talking about it. So they'll be very happy to answer any questions about their charging setups or trips they've taken, all kinds of stuff. So I think that's a great thing to do as well if you're considering an EV. So another factor you're probably looking at if you're looking at buying a new car, at least hopefully you are, unless you've got a lot of money to spare, is how much it's going to cost up front, right? So price is probably the number one reason I hear from people of why they don't want to buy an electric car, because it's just straight up too expensive right now, which certainly is the case. Plug-in cars right now on average have a higher starting price than gas vehicles. Fortunately, we have seen with similar new vehicles, the cost of ownership over the long term is much lower with an EV. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you just can't afford that upfront cost. So I would say definitely don't stretch yourself financially. If you're like can't afford an EV, don't try to like stretch yourself to afford it. That's not a smart financial decision. But
no.
I think a thing to keep in mind is that the cost has continued to go down for EVs. We've got a lot more EVs available under $40,000. I mean, kind of like we were talking about with this study, is like back in 2012, you had the Leaf, which was still kind of an expensive car. I think it was above $40,000 to get. It was. Do you think it was up there? I would think. We can look it up real quick.
I don't even know actually. Oh, 35.2.
Okay.
So we're close.
So pretty close. So the 2012 Leaf with how long of a range?
I think like 80 miles. The range was 73 miles.
So the 2012 Leaf had a starting price of around $35,000 and a range of 73 miles. So I don't know many people that would be happy spending that much on a car that can only go 73 miles. So certainly price has gone down. Now you can buy a Model 3 for around 73 or for around $37,000 and it's got 250 plus miles of range. So it's certainly got a lot better range to cost ratio has gone way up. It's like so much cheaper to buy like a good EV now that can go 250 plus miles.
Not to mention used ones.
That's what I was going to say too. I think the other reason the cars are so expensive right now is the used market is almost non-existent. Like we don't have a lot of EVs out there, and most people with an EV are keeping their EV for a very long time. So you don't see a lot of cars on the used market. I was going to say with the used cars too, that's usually what I tell people when they say they can't afford an EV or don't want to spend that much money on an EV is the used market is quickly growing as the just overall fleet of EVs gets bigger. So there are there's going to be a lot of good EVs on the market in the future on the used market. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I know at least with the Model 3s, they're holding their used value so well because most people that buy them end up keeping them, and there's just not, the supply is just so small. So there's not a lot of used EVs out there.
There are some good examples for bolts. Like you can get like some pretty low mileage bolts for under $23,000.
Yeah.
And not to mention like there are I've seen some deals around $12,000 for bolts.
Wow.
So if you are looking to get into like a decent electric vehicle with like a decent amount of driving range over 230 miles, highly recommend a used bolt.
That is definitely something I would do if we lived in a house right now, is for Mallory, probably get her a new car and get her like a used EV that has like just to get her to work, because that's literally all she does is just drive to work and back. I drive my car basically everywhere else. So so I think, again, if you're a 2-car family and one person is only using their car to drive back and forth to work, I think buying a used EV can save you a lot of money and will meet your needs just fine if you don't need a fancy car to drive a lot of miles, right?
Yep.
So
buy a Chevy Bolt. Not sponsored by GM.
So I know we've been harping on this frickin' study the whole time of how it's
fired up on it.
It's putting EVs down, but one thing I did find here that I thought was pretty interesting and kind of ends it on a high note, I guess, is that one of the factors in people turning in their EVs or trading in their EVs was that an EV just wasn't right for them at that time, but they could see themselves buying an EV in the future, which I think is great. I think there's certainly people that bought EVs in the past, maybe it just didn't quite meet their needs. Maybe it wasn't the right type of vehicle. It didn't have enough range. Charging wasn't fast enough. Price was too much, whatever else. But I think there's definitely some positive insights from people that have owned these cars, realizing that, hey, this didn't quite work, but I definitely could see this technology improving, which I think has definitely been the case.
Yeah. There's tons of new models coming out. 2020 was kind of that magic mark. I think
we're crazy.
How many new cars are coming out? I know, same here. Every time I turn around, there's a new electric car being unveiled, which is awesome.
I know. I know when I started my channel, I was like 2019 is when I started, and I basically talked about every EV that was released that year on my channel, and now like I can't even keep up with all the cars being released.
I know. It's unbelievable. But that's where I would love to see in a few years people do this study again.
Definitely.
And see where we're at.
For sure. So that will do it for this one. I think this is definitely a good one to send to your friends that maybe are considering an electric vehicle. Maybe you're already on the EV train and you're set on buying an EV for your next vehicle and just trying to learn from us. But if you've got somebody in your life that is looking at an EV and maybe is trying to consider some of these things, I think this is a great podcast to share with them. So we do appreciate it if you do that. If you do have any questions or things you want us to cover on future episodes, reach out to us on our social media accounts. We're on Twitter at livingelectric_, Instagram at Living Electric Podcast, and on Facebook, our page is Living Electric Podcast. So hope to hear from you, and we'll see you in the next episode.